Echoes of Chernobyl. You ever wonder about the stories that hide in the darkest corners of history? Those tales that chill you to your core? Well, I've got one for you that'll make your blood run cold. It starts with a place that still haunts our nightmares. Chernobyl. Picture it, the eerie calm of Pripyat, a city nestled next to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. I was there as a young engineer, ready to embark on what I thought was just another day on the job. The sky was clear, and the plant seemed to hum with life, as if it were a beast waiting to be awakened. The reactor was a colossal thing, a technological marvel encased in concrete. It pulsed with energy, and the air was thick with the smell of ozone. But I'd worked at Chernobyl long enough to know that beneath its facade of power lay the potential for disaster. My fellow workers and I had a camaraderie, a sense that we were all in this together. We understood the risks, and we believed in the importance of our work, or so we thought. The reactor was due for a safety test, one that had been postponed time and time again. As the hours passed, tension grew like a storm on the horizon. I could feel the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. It was a day that would change my life forever. As the test began, I watched the control room with bated breath. The reactor's power output was supposed to decrease, but instead, it began to rise. Panic spread among the workers, and I could see the fear in their eyes. We were hurtling toward a disaster. In a desperate bid to control the situation, I made the split-second decision to shut down the reactor. It was a move that would save lives, or so I believed. But I had no way of knowing that I was about to trigger a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. The reactor fought back like a wounded beast, lashing out in its death throes. There was a deafening explosion, and the world around us was consumed in a blinding white light. It was like a nightmare, a living hell. I remember the heat, the searing pain that seeped through every fiber of my being. I watched as my fellow workers were thrown to the ground, their bodies contorted by the blast. It was a scene of unspeakable horror, and I felt a sense of guilt and horror that would stay with me for the rest of my days. As the dust settled, I found myself in a daze, a survivor in a city that had become a ghost town. Pripyat was a place of desolation, its streets empty, its buildings abandoned. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the ground was contaminated with a poison that would last for centuries. I joined the team of liquidators, the brave souls who ventured into the heart of the disaster to clean up the mess. It was a nightmare, a descent into a hellish landscape of radiation and decay. The Geiger counters screamed like banshees, and the air was heavy with the taste of metal. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something strange. I could hear voices, whispers in the silence. At first, I thought it was just the product of my overactive imagination, a symptom of the trauma I had experienced. But the voices grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to call to me, to guide me through the ruins of Pripyat. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led by an unseen hand, that I was not alone in this desolate place. One night, as I wandered through the ruins, I came across a figure in the darkness. It was a man, or at least it appeared to be. He was dressed in the uniform of a Chernobyl worker, his face hidden in the shadows. He spoke to me in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. He told me that he was a survivor, like me, and that he had been waiting for someone to help him. He claimed to know the secrets of Chernobyl, the truth that had been hidden from the world. As he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was as if he knew things that no one else could possibly know, that he held the key to the mysteries that had haunted me for so long. He led me through the ruins, deeper into the heart of the disaster, and there, in the shadows, I saw something that would change my life forever. It was a room, a chamber of darkness and decay, filled with the echoes of the past. In the center of the room stood a figure, a man dressed in a lab coat, his face twisted in a rictus of agony. It was as if he were frozen in time, a prisoner of the disaster, that had consumed him. The man in the shadows told me that this was the truth of Chernobyl, the dark secret that had been buried beneath layers of lies and deception. He claimed that the reactor had not exploded by accident, but that it had been sabotaged, that there were forces at work that went beyond human understanding. And then, in a flash of blinding light, the figure in the lab coat vanished, leaving me standing in the darkness, alone and bewildered. I couldn't make sense of what I had just witnessed. It was as if I had glimpsed a world beyond our own, a realm of darkness and chaos that lay hidden in the heart of Chernobyl. The man in the shadows had shown me a truth that defied explanation, a mystery that would continue to haunt my thoughts for the rest of my days. As I left Pripyat, I knew that I carried with me the memory of that fateful day, a reminder that there are forces in this world that go beyond our understanding. The Chernobyl disaster held secrets that defied logic, that challenged the very fabric of reality. It was a place of wonder and terror, a realm of the unknown, and I couldn't help but wonder if the truth of Chernobyl would ever be revealed. Shadows of Fukushima. All right, gather round, and I'll spin you a tale that'll give you chills. This story begins in the heart of Fukushima, Japan, amidst the hum of a nuclear power plant. The air was thick with the scent of industry, and the sound of machinery reverberated in my bones. I was just an average worker, doing my rounds like any other day. The reactor, that behemoth of metal and concrete, stood before me, its presence both awe-inspiring and daunting. You could feel the weight of potential disaster in the air, always there, lurking. Now let me tell you, no one expects disaster on their shift. We go through our routines, checking and rechecking, believing that we've got it all under control. It's human nature, isn't it? We think we're invincible until reality proves us wrong. That fateful day, it started like any other. The control room buzzed with activity, buttons blinking, screens displaying endless streams of data. We were about to conduct a routine maintenance check, but the universe had other plans. The reactor's readings began to fluctuate, a tremor in the machinery. Panic swept through the control room like wildfire. The temperature was rising, and the alarms blared in our ears. We were on the brink of catastrophe. In a split-second decision, I made a call that would change everything. I initiated the emergency shutdown, a move that was meant to save lives. Little did I know, I had just set off a chain of events that would lead us to the edge of hell. The reactor fought back, as if it resented being silenced. There was a deafening explosion, a blinding flash of light that seared through my vision. The world seemed to blur into chaos, and I was tossed like a rag doll in the storm. I found myself on the ground, disoriented and struggling to breathe. The control room was a scene of unimaginable horror, a nightmare come to life. My fellow workers lay strewn about, their bodies contorted in agony. It was a sight that would haunt my dreams for years to come. As the dust settled, I forced myself to my feet, a survivor in a world that had been torn apart. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of burning metal, and the ground beneath my feet trembled with aftershocks. Outside, Fukushima was a city on the brink of chaos. The air was thick with panic, the streets filled with people fleeing for their lives. It was a scene of desperation and despair, a city in the throes of a disaster that would echo through history. I joined the ranks of the brave souls known as the liquidators, the men and women who ventured into the heart of the disaster to clean up the mess. It was a mission of unparalleled danger, a descent into a realm of radiation and decay. As I moved through the ruins, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the shadows themselves held secrets, as if the very air whispered tales of the horrors that had transpired. And then it happened. In a moment of distraction, I stumbled, and before I knew it, I was falling. My body plunged into darkness, and I landed with a bone-jarring impact. I was in a chamber of nightmares, a pit filled with nuclear waste. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the walls seemed to close in around me. Panic surged through my veins as I realized the gravity of my situation. I struggled to my feet, my body aching from the fall. Every breath felt like fire in my lungs, every step a test of my resolve. I knew that I had to get out, that my life depended on it. As I stumbled through the darkness, I could feel the effects of the radiation seeping into my bones. It was a sensation of dread, a knowledge that I was facing a fate worse than death. I pushed on, driven by sheer determination and the will to survive. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. The chamber seemed to stretch on forever, an endless maze of darkness and despair. I could hear the echoes of my own footsteps, a haunting reminder of my isolation. And then, just as I was about to give in to despair, I saw it, a faint glimmer of light, a sliver of hope in the darkness. I stumbled toward it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I emerged from the chamber, I was met with a sight that would stay with me for the rest of my days. The world outside had changed, transformed into a realm of shadows and echoes. It was as if I had entered a new dimension, a place beyond human understanding. I stumbled through the ruins of Fukushima, my body weakened by the radiation. The voices in my head grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to guide me, to lead me through the desolation. And then, in the distance, I saw him, the man in the shadows, the one who had led me through the darkness. He stood before me, his face hidden in the shadows. He spoke to me, his voice a whisper in the silence. He told me that he was a survivor, like me, and that he had been waiting for someone to help him. He claimed to know the secrets of Fukushima, the truth that had been hidden from the world. As he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was as if he knew things that no one else could possibly know, that he held the key to the mysteries that had haunted me for so long. He led me deeper into the heart of the disaster, to a place where the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. And there, in the shadows, I saw it. A chamber filled with figures, like specters frozen in time. They were the victims of the disaster, their faces contorted in agony. It was a scene of unspeakable horror, a reminder of the true cost of Fukushima. The man in the shadows told me that this was the truth of Fukushima, the dark secret that had been buried beneath layers of lies and deception. He claimed that the disaster had not been a mere accident, but a deliberate act of sabotage, that there were forces at work that went beyond human understanding. And then, in a flash of blinding light, the figures vanished, leaving me standing in the darkness, alone and bewildered. I couldn't make sense of what I had just witnessed. It was as if I had glimpsed a world beyond our own, a realm of darkness and chaos that lay hidden in the heart of Fukushima. The man in the shadows had shown me a truth that defied explanation, a mystery that would continue to haunt my thoughts for the rest of my days. As I left Fukushima, I knew that I carried with me the memory of that fateful day, a reminder that there are forces in this world that go beyond our understanding. The Fukushima disaster held secrets that defied logic, that challenged the very fabric of reality. It was a place of wonder and terror, a realm of the unknown, and I couldn't help but wonder if the truth of Fukushima would ever be revealed. The slow burn. All right, sit tight, because I've got a story that'll make your skin crawl. We're diving into the gritty world of nuclear power, where I spent my days in the belly of the beast, handling toxic waste like it was just another job. You see, it's not like the movies, all flashy buttons and dramatic countdowns. It's a grind, day in and day out. The plant hummed with a steady rhythm, the air thick with the scent of metal and the distant echo of machinery. My routine was simple. Suit up, handle the waste, rinse and repeat. At first, it felt like any other job, just a paycheck at the end of the day. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice subtle changes. My skin seemed to pale, and my energy levels plummeted. I chalked it up to long hours and stress, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. You see, the thing about handling toxic waste is you don't always see the damage it's doing. It's insidious, creeping into your system like a silent intruder. You feel fine one day, and the next, it's like your body's turned against you. I remember the first time I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at me. My skin was pallid, almost translucent, and dark circles etched deep under my eyes. I was wasting away, and there was no denying it. Still, I soldiered on, pushing through the fatigue and the ache that seemed to settle in my bones. It was like a slow burn, a relentless gnawing at the edges of my existence. Every day, I suited up and faced the waste, knowing that it was slowly devouring me from the inside. As the months passed, I watched my body deteriorate, like a car running on fumes. The doctors couldn't explain it, couldn't pinpoint the cause of my decline, but I knew. It was the waste, the poison that I handled every day without a second thought. I began to hear whispers in the shadows, voices that seemed to dance at the edge of my consciousness. They were like echoes, distant and indistinct, but growing louder with each passing day. It was as if the very walls of the plant held secrets that were seeping into my mind. One night, as I stood before the barrels of waste, I felt a surge of anger, a sudden rebellion against the chains that bound me to this place. I wanted out, wanted to break free from the cycle of decay that was consuming me. With a sudden burst of energy, I pushed the barrel away, sending it crashing to the ground. The room seemed to spin, and the voices grew louder, swirling around me like a tornado of sound. It was as if the very air was alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy. And then, in a flash of blinding light, I was transported. It was like I had stepped into a nightmare, a realm of darkness and decay. The air was heavy with the stench of rot, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to shift and writhe. I stumbled through the darkness, my body weak and unsteady. Every step was a struggle, every breath a labored gasp. I knew that I was nearing the end, that my body was finally succumbing to the toxic embrace of the waste. And then, in the distance, I saw it, a door, standing alone in the darkness like a beacon of hope. I stumbled toward it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped through the door, I was met with a sight that would stay with me for the rest of my days. It was a chamber filled with figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. They were like specters, frozen in time, their faces contorted in agony. I knew then that I had stumbled upon the truth, the dark heart of the plant. These were the souls of those who had come before me, the ones who had paid the price for their proximity to the waste. And then, in a final, blinding flash of light, I was transported back to the plant, back to the reality of my impending demise. The voices were louder now, more insistent. They seemed to be urging me on, guiding me toward my final destination. As I stood before the barrels of waste, I knew that this was the end. My body was a shell, a husk of what it once was, but in that moment I felt a strange sense of peace. I pushed the barrel away one final time, and as it crashed to the ground, the room seemed to explode in a symphony of light and sound. It was as if the very walls of the plant were rebelling, shaking off the weight of years of darkness. And then, in an instant, it was over. The plant was silent, the darkness receded, and I was left standing alone in the wreckage. As I took my final breath, I knew that I had found my freedom. The waste had taken its toll, but in the end, I had broken free from its grasp. And as the darkness closed in around me, I welcomed it, knowing that I was finally at peace.